Hi, watching this video will take 20 minutes of your time and leave you with a bunch of useless information about Tears of the Kingdom because I was only going to do 15, but I figured, 20 sounds better. Let's go. Since about 5 to 6 years have passed since the events of Breath of the Wild, and Link was 17 or 18 years old at that time, that means he's between 22 and 24 years old for this game. That puts him solidly past the legal drinking age, and yes, Link can drink now. As you may remember, the Noble Canteen is a bar in Gerudo Town that serves a beverage called the Noble Pursuit, and now Link can order them and even learn the recipe. The game specifically calls this drink a fruit juice, but also states that its tropical flavor will cheer you right up, suggesting Link is a happy drunk. But don't worry, there's no residual effects from knocking back a few of these akin to what happens in games like the Grand Theft Auto series or anything like that. So this drink may be a non-alcoholic beverage with a reputation that precedes it. If you fuse one of Hudson's cutouts from Terrytown onto your shield and then pose in front of NPCs to start a conversation, they'll either play along or straight up think you're Hudson, even his own daughter. My favorite response is from Beetle, who comments on the haircut is similar to his, and while Hudson himself thinks it looks pretty okay, I've always thought it looked pretty ridiculous. Also, the cutout temporarily disappears during cutscenes and while fast travel warping for some reason. Nintendo must not have expected anyone to actually fuse it to a shield and only use it as a wind gust weapon. Giotto the Zora is so deep in thought about the broken stone tablet that he can't see what's happening right in front of him. If you repair the tablet he's ruminating on before ever conversing with him, he'll be entirely caught off guard. He even admits he wasn't paying attention and then still doesn't see it until Link finally fills him in. It's like, come on dude, I walked right past you floating this gigantic stone through the air in front of your face and glued it in place with magic. How'd you miss it? Likewise, over in Hitano Village, there's a woman named Koyan who stands on the dock night and day, 24/7, staring out at the water, lamenting the fact that her grandfather's message in a bottle is floating in the middle of the pond where she can't get to it. You can quickly help her out by fetching it with Ultra Hand, and although she's facing straight in your direction, watching the whole rescue mission take place, she'll still have no idea that you've done it. What's even funnier is that when you do retrieve the bottle, you can wave it in front of her and she even looks up at it a little bit. You can then place it behind her where she shouldn't be able to see it, and yet after a moment she will realize what you've done. It's as if she has eyes behind her head, so she doesn't always use the ones in front. While walking towards the edge of any building or cliff, Link does a subtle head turn towards the ground to see how close he is to stepping over. However, despite his awareness of his surroundings, he will still walk clear off the edge without any attempt to grab on for safety. If you're a creative and you want to make some cool Tears of the Kingdom videos like me, then this one will be super useful. There's a simple glitch you can take advantage of to make some beautiful cinematic dolly shots, and it's really easy to do. Just stand where you want the camera to move towards and save. Then go to any other location within view. I use one of the beacons to be sure that the location is within reach. Once you've made your way over to the target camera starting location, activate Ascend and let Link look all the way up to the sky. Pause and reload your hard save file. This causes the camera to stay where it was held while you had Ascend activated and sweep through the overworld back to Link, and it looks so stinking cool. If you select the Amiibo rune during any of these dolly shots, the camera will stop or slow down and give you a chance to pan around for even more customizable creative freedom. Going into bullet time doesn't deplete your stamina like it did in Breath of the Wild, but rather only when you fire off arrows, so you can jump from however high you want and fall in slow motion the whole way from a sky island down through a chasm if you want to. Link has a mean, determined expression on his face while in this state, and of course, physics still apply, so he will take damage upon landing. The vertical units and horizontal units of the coordinate system built into the Purapad are unequal. Instead, they're based on the amount of space Link occupies, so one vertical unit is about one Link's height, and one horizontal unit is about one pace of Link moving at his average speed. The highest altitude coordinate you can reach during intended gameplay is at 3009, on top of the pillars of this tiny star-shaped sky island located above Lookout Landing. The highest you can possibly go before you get one of those "you can't go any farther" boundary messages is 3,293 vertical units. The moment I reached that height, Link got knocked off his hover bike. The lowest point in all of Hyrule is Gloom's origin while fighting the Demon King's army at -2525. When I reached this spot, Link fell off the wall, voided out, and respawned back at the fights. The lowest you can go using glitches to clip out of the overworld and find a place to stand was shared in my Discord with this screenshot showing Link at -3080. But the deepest you can travel seems unlimited because there's no ground around the outer edges of the map to stop you, and at -8105 the camera stops following Link altogether. The farthest I've seen anyone go before giving up and warping back to the surface was -101,978, done by fellow YouTuber Girlboss. Her video is linked in the description. We learned from the lore of this game that the Typhlo ruins were not in fact built by the Zonai, which was always thought to be the case throughout the adventures of Breath of the Wild. But this game confirms by reading these plaques that this place was built by Hyruleans as a monument of loyalty to King Rauru for sacrificing his life to save the kingdom of Hyrule from the Demon King. They're even written in modern Hyrulean and not Zonai text, so researchers can read them. Logically, this makes sense because King Rauru and his sister Minoru were the last two surviving Zonai at the time, or at least the last two who hadn't left for somewhere else, whether that be the skies or another dimension or whatever. So although we've learned a lot about the Zonai from Tears of the Kingdom, their history is still quite mysterious. If you attach a rocket to your horse's towing harness and set it off, nothing will happen. Your horse is anchored down pretty good. Well, that's only true if your horse is standing still. If you simultaneously startle your horse when launching the rocket, it will go for a little bit of a ride. Oops. Don't worry, no animals were harmed in the making of this video. This game contains countless thoughtful references to previous installments of the Legend of Zelda series. Arguably the most practical of these is the inclusion of several iconic weapons. The most recognizable are the Dusk Bow and Dusk Claymore, both modeled after powerful weapons from Twilight Princess, which were known as the Twilight Bow and the Sword of the Six Sages. Their descriptions state these weapons were handed down to the Kingdom of Hyrule's royal family ages ago, and the bow specifically was used by a princess who fought beasts of the Twilight. Nintendo did a great job of protecting players from themselves as far as getting soft-locked on the Great Sky Island goes. In the 10-minute video, I talked about Rauru opening up a warp point even if you missed it, but they even set a check for the Decayed Master Sword to ensure players never got locked in the Room of Awakening. You can slam the sword on the ground as much as you want, but it's got unlimited durability power in here. You can see by how it continues to have that little sparkle of a brand new weapon even after you slash the second set of vines. But once you do that, the game knows you're free and limits its durability. And while we're on this Decayed Sword, the game's logo alludes to something being off about the Master Sword in the way that it changes from busted up metal to full Zonai magic as it weaves through the Z in Zelda. The logo also features this emblem which resembles an Ouroboros, but that's not what it is. In case you're unaware, an Ouroboros is a circular symbol usually depicting a snake, but sometimes a dragon swallowing its own tail. It represents wholeness or infinity. But the Tears logo has two dragons. It's more likely that what this truly is that both dragons are locked in a divine struggle, an everlasting game of cat and mouse. One is constantly chasing the other, and they'll both never get anywhere. It symbols the eternal struggle between two opposing forces, the light of Hyrule and the darkness of Ganondorf, making this symbol more similar to the yin-yang. These forces are forever cosmically interconnected. They're different in every way, but simultaneously a part of the same whole, like two sides of a coin. All this is to say that the logo is clearly a clever reference to the everlasting curse that Demise set upon Hyrule in Skyward Sword. CC, the fashion connoisseur, is not the first fashionista the Zelda series has ever known. She shares characteristics with Madame Couture from Triforce Heroes, who owns a high-end clothing store where Link can purchase new outfits with materials and rupees. Some significant differences between the two are that CC isn't outwardly a cat lover and is not a magical witch, while Madame Couture has no political aspirations. You can startle your horses by splashing them with a blue choo-choo. This wasn't a thing in the previous game, but it seems more realistic. I mean, it'd startle me too, and if you wait a moment after the horse settles down, it'll eventually shake off the extra water to help dry. There's an NPC named Wharton who stands on the balcony of the Hitano Village Inn. During the Breath of the Wild days, he was Link's fellow traveler brother, but it seems he chose to settle down and stay hanging out at the inn for the last few years after falling in love with innkeeper Prima. When we first meet up with these two, they're arguing about Cece's fashion trends around town, and I've got to side with Wharton on this one. The mushroom hats are pretty hideous. Stand your ground, my man. This fad will soon pass. Ocarina of Time is perhaps the Zelda game with the most references and Easter eggs besides Breath of the Wild. One of these references is the Kakariko Village well, which in Ocarina of Time, after completing the water temple, it drains to reveal a mini dungeon. This area leads to the royal family's torture chamber, which contains the Lens of Truth. This is arguably the darkest place ever created in a Zelda game, and in Tears of the Kingdom, since we can explore down wells quite freely, we find remnants of this nasty place. There's red splotches found all over the wall, which some have theorized to be bloodstains of enemies of the kingdom who were violently interrogated by the Sheikah soldiers before their deaths. Something else that supports this theory is that if you ascend to get out of this well, you wind up on the hillside right next to a single silent princess, which Princess Zelda has been known to leave around Hyrule to commemorate lost lives. Another parallel between this game and Ocarina of Time is seen in Memory Number 7, a show of fealty, where Ganondorf tries to get close to the royal family to get closer to stealing the secret stone by swearing allegiance to Hyrule and putting an end to the conflict. Both Zelda and Rauru can sense his ill intentions here, still Rauru chooses to play along and keep his friends close and his enemies closer. In this scene, we see Ganondorf kneel and bow his head the same way he does while Princess Zelda watches through the window in Ocarina. She knows he's up to no good in both games and calls out his insincerity. And further still with the connections to Ocarina of Time is the fact that when we first find the Great Deku Tree, it's sick from being infested with gloom, the same way the Deku Tree is diseased with evil from Queen Goma. The big difference is that we can restore the Great Deku Tree back to health in this game, whereas it dies in Ocarina and is succeeded by the Deku Tree Sprout. You can make a simple fulcrum scale to weigh objects using Zonai devices and objects found around the overworld. The best design I've seen uses an upside-down wagon staked to the ground with a sheet of wood glued to the wheels on each side. I like to add boards to the edges to keep objects from falling off. Using this contraption, we can see that Link weighs 10 apples, and white-maned Lionel Saberhorns weigh the same as apples. Diamonds are super heavy, just one weighs about the same as Link. Pretty crazy stuff. Making useless contraptions with Ultra Hand reminds me of an old Canadian TV program called The Red Green Show, specifically Handyman Corner. For example, you still can't pet dogs in this game, and to unequip a weapon and reach for nothing with the proper camera angle to make it appear as though you're petting canines might not satisfy. So today on Handy Hylian Corner, I'm going to give this dog all the pets by building an automatic dog petting machine. I attached a Zonai wheel to a Zonai stake with a rod sticking out and put a bokoblin arm at the end for a hand to pet the dog. So even though it's not Link who's petting the dog, it's Link who built the dog petting machine. So remember, if the Vi don't find you handsome, they should at least find you handy. King Rauru is significantly taller than Link, so it stands to reason that the right arm transplant he receives at the start of the game must have included an unspoken of step where the arm was condensed down to fit Link's body. Otherwise, this enormous appendage would just about be dragging around on the ground as Link moves. And yeah, there's room for a dirty joke in there. On May 30th, 2023, just 18 days after its release, Japanese speedrunner ZDI was the first person on planet Earth to beat this game in under 1 hour, 59 minutes and 22 seconds to be exact. Now, many of the strats he used are considered primitive by today's standards, but it was a humongous achievement for the Zelda speedrunning community, and he did it using a digital copy of version 1.1.1. As of the making of this video, the preferred method of speedrunning this game is to use digital version 1.0 because digital games load faster than physical copies, and 1.0 is the game in its most glitchy form. Played the same way it was available to be experienced the day it came out. Well, sort of. See, on May 11th, 2023, the day before the game's release, version 1.1 was created. This means that all physical copies were manufactured and shipped to retailers to prepare for the launch with version 1.0, and that digital 1.0 was never commercially available. The only way to play digital 1.0 has always been to homebrew your Switch, which is controversial to say the least. This has led to extensive discussions, debates, and community voting to determine what's legal and what's not, and how to categorize new submissions to the boards when players speedrun this game. And speaking of different versions, there have been 5 patches since version 1.0. I've just mentioned 1.1 and 1.1.1. There's also 1.1.2, 1.2.0, and the current, as of the making of this video, 1.2.1. These patches rolled out rapid fire after the initial release and then abruptly stopped in August. Since it's been officially announced that there's no plans for any DLC, it seems safe to say that Nintendo is also finished quote-unquote improving the gameplay experience. I put the word improving in quotes here because many of the glitches patched through these updates had no effect on regular casual gameplay, and in many speedrunners' opinions mainly served to stifle the speedrunning experience by blocking the ability to easily duplicate weapons and items. One of those early duplication glitches is named the Zuggle, named because it's a form of item smuggling and was discovered by a player named Zevlon, or Zevlion. I consider this information useless because 99% of players are on the current version where this glitch has been long patched. Basically, Zuggling overloads the game and makes for some crazy things. Here we see I created a Link Scarecrow at the expense of losing the rest of Link's body. The game will remain this way through reloads and must be reset entirely to return to normal. Or you can simply drop all your Zuggled weapons. At the base of the Great Plateau is a large doorway with bombable rock blocking the entrance. This doorway was covered with dirt in Breath of the Wild and could not be interacted with, but now we can clear the way. If you do so, it'll drain the water filling the path above, and the map changes to reflect this, meaning that the Purapad updates in real time. When entering an area of the map where temperatures reach extreme cold or heat, there's now a little message that pops up next to the temperature gauge that says unbearable cold or unbearable heat, as if all the other indicators we already had weren't already enough. The shivering and being able to see your frosty breath, sweating and swaying around with heat exhaustion, the sounds that chime when entering these areas, or the needle of the gauge itself. The maximum number of things you can stick together using Ultra Hand is 21. The reason for this has likely more to do with the fact that the Nintendo Switch is not a super powerful machine like the PS5 or the Xbox Series X than it does with Nintendo trying to stifle player creativity. Creating structures and vehicles using more items than this likely led to performance issues within the game during development. And on that note, if you fuse 21 shock emitters and drop them into the water, the frame rate will plummet down to about 13 frames per second. Anywhere you can find low gravity and an enemy is a great opportunity to practice your juggling skills, or play a quick game of Don't Let It Touch the Ground. You can initiate this with a slam attack to knock the enemy up into the air, then target onto them and keep poking at them with a spear to keep them up there as long as you can or until they run out of HP. You cannot start a campfire on a tower launch pad. If you'd like, you can light a bundle of wood on fire, but it'll always remain a bundle that you can just pick back up because the fire will never burn it up completely for whatever reason. If you try to fuse an item to the Decayed Master Sword, you'll get a message saying you can't use fuse on a damaged blade. But this sword is decayed, not damaged. Alright, well, it's objectively damaged as it shatters against the dehydrated Demon King's power, but this message pops up even if the decayed sword hasn't been used outside of cutting the vines to escape the Room of Awakening, which I already mentioned earlier that it's still got that sparkle of a brand new weapon. And of course, you can use fuse on damaged weapons, a badly damaged weapon in fact. So to be specific, you can't use fuse on a decayed blade, and fusing to a badly damaged one is possible, but probably not worth it depending on the value of the item used because the weapon is about to break anyway. And time. Like this video if you'd like to see 60 minutes of useless information about Tears of the Kingdom, and subscribe to make sure you catch it when it comes out. And if you should know anything about this game that's cool and interesting yet not conducive to getting better gameplay, tell me about it in the comments. I'd love to know. And until next time, stay well, stay cool, and always keep punching out there. Aloha.